The United States enters Israel's war against Iran, a comprehensive analysis.
Please let me know what you think about this comment of mine. The geopolitical landscape of the Middle East has long been characterized by complex alliances, historical grievances, and a persistent cycle of conflict. Among the most significant flashpoints in this region is the enduring tension between Israel and Iran. This relationship has been marked by hostility, mutual suspicion, and an ongoing power struggle that has profound implications not only for the local populace but also for global security. The hypothetical scenario of the United States entering a war on behalf of Israel against Iran presents numerous strategic, political, and humanitarian considerations that merit a thorough examination.
To understand the prospect of U.S. involvement in a conflict between Israel and Iran, one must first grasp the historical context of their animosity. The Islamic Revolution of 1979 was a watershed moment that transformed Iran from a U.S.-aligned monarchy to an Islamic republic opposed to American influence in the region. Iran's support for militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Palestinian territories has further complicated its relationship with Israel, which views Iran as its primary existential threat.
In recent decades, Israeli intelligence and military actions have increasingly focused on countering Iran's influence.
The 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA), aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear program, symbolized international attempts at diplomacy but ultimately led to renewed hostilities following the United States' withdrawal from the agreement in 2018 under President Donald Trump. The ongoing tensions, coupled with Iran's military entrenchment in Syria and its vocal support for anti-Israel militant groups, have fed a narrative in Israel that military action against Iran may become necessary. The U.S.-Israel relationship, characterized by military, economic, and political assistance, is rooted in shared democratic values and strategic interests. Following the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. has increasingly viewed Iran through a lens of security threats, particularly concerning terrorism and regional stability. Israel's concerns regarding Iran's nuclear ambitions have been echoed by U.S. officials, contributing to a unified approach to countering Iranian influence in the region.
However, the U.S. has historically been cautious about direct military intervention, often opting for diplomatic solutions or financial support for Israel rather than becoming embroiled in open conflict. The potential for U.S. involvement in a war on Israel's behalf represents a significant escalation that could reshape the geopolitical dynamics in the Middle East. The hypothetical scenario begins with a triggering event, such as an escalatory incident involving Iranian forces and Israeli military operations.
For instance, a bold Iranian strike on an Israeli asset or a significant act of terror against Israeli civilians could prompt an Israeli response deemed too limited for the scale of the Iranian aggression. In this precarious moment, Israeli leaders might appeal to their American allies for assistance, framing the conflict as not only a defense of their national sovereignty but also as a critical battle against Iranian expansionism. For the United States to enter the conflict on Israel's behalf, there would need to be a solid justification rooted in both international law and domestic support. U.S. officials would likely emphasize the following aspects. 1. Self-defense. Under international law, nations have the right to defend themselves against armed aggression. If Israel can convincingly argue that it is acting in self-defense against an unlawful attack by Iran, this might provide a legal framework for U.S. involvement. 2. Countering terrorism. Given that Iran supports various militant groups that pose threats to Israeli and, by extension, U.S. interests, Washington could frame its involvement as a broader counterterrorism effort. 3. Regional stability. U.S. officials might argue that Iranian aggression threatens not only Israel but also the stability of the entire Middle East. Such arguments could attract support from Gulf states that have their own concerns about Iran. 4. Historical commitment. The U.S. has long positioned itself as a protector of Israel. This historical commitment can serve as a rhetorical device to gain public support and rally bipartisan political backing for military involvement. Entering a conflict is a monumental decision typically involving multiple stakeholders, including the President, the National Security Council, and key members of Congress. The administration would need to evaluate several critical factors before committing U.S. forces. 1. Military readiness. the U.S. must assess its military capabilities and readiness to engage in a conflict with Iran, which has well-established military assets and alliances. 2. Public opinion. The domestic political climate plays a significant role in the decision-making process. Polls and public sentiment would be closely monitored, as the American populace may have war fatigue following prolonged military engagements in Iraq and Afghanistan. 3. International reactions. The potential for U.S. military action to provoke a broader regional conflict or result in retaliatory strikes against U.S. personnel or interests in the area would be a significant consideration. 4. Long-term strategy. Policymakers would need to consider the implications for U.S. strategic interests in the Middle East, including relationships with other regional powers and the long-term stability of Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. If the U.S. resolves to enter the conflict, it would need to develop a military strategy that aligns with Israel's objectives while considering the complexities of engaging a country like Iran. Potential strategies could include 1. Airstrikes. Precision airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, military bases, and logistical hubs could be a primary focus, aiming to degrade Iran's military capabilities without engaging in a full-scale ground invasion. 2. Cyber warfare. The U.S. could leverage its superior cyber capabilities to disrupt Iran's military communications and missile systems, thereby further incapacitating its ability to conduct operations against Israel. 3. Support for allies. The U.S. could bolster its allies in the region, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who share concerns about Iranian expansionism, thereby creating a coalition to contain Iran. 4. Special operations. Deploying special forces for reconnaissance and targeted missions against key Iranian military leaders or assets could be a part of a broader to destabilize Iranian command structures. The U.S. entering a war against Iran on behalf of Israel would have profound implications for the Middle East and beyond. This decision could lead to 1. Escalation of hostilities. Direct U.S. military involvement would likely provoke a swift response from Iran, potentially leading to a broader regional conflict that draws in regional powers and militant groups. 2. Impact on U.S. troops. There would be a clear risk to American servicemen and women stationed in the region. The possibility of Iranian retaliation through asymmetric warfare would necessitate heightened security measures for U.S. bases and personnel. 3. Immense humanitarian crisis. In any armed conflict, civilian populations bear the brunt of the consequences. A war involving Iran could lead to widespread displacement, casualties, and humanitarian disasters, necessitating a robust international response to provide aid and support. 4. Shift in alliances. Regional dynamics could shift drastically as nations reassess their alliances. Countries that once tolerated or supported U.S. efforts may reconsider their positions, particularly if fallout from the conflict risks their national interests. 5. Global economic impact. The potential for a conflict to disrupt oil supplies from the Persian Gulf could have far-reaching economic consequences, affecting global markets and energy prices. In light of the potentially catastrophic consequences of a conflict between Israel and Iran, a focus on diplomatic efforts becomes imperative. The U.S. could leverage its position as an ally of Israel to promote dialogue and seek de-escalation. 1. Back-channel communications. Establishing quiet negotiations between Israeli and Iranian officials, perhaps facilitated by a neutral third party, could serve to diffuse immediate tensions. 2. Multilateral engagement. The U.S. could bring together international stakeholders, including European powers, Russia, and regional allies, to discuss a renewed framework for addressing concerns related to Iran's nuclear program and militant actions. 3. Incentives for dialogue. Offering incentives to Iran, such as economic relief or reduced sanctions, could provide motivation for engagement and prove beneficial in averting conflict. 4. Regional security forums. Promoting collective security arrangements among states in the region could create an environment conducive to cooperation rather than conflict. The hypothetical scenario in which the United States enters a war against Iran on behalf of Israel represents an intersection of history, politics, and military strategy. The potential decision would not only affect U.S.-Iran relations but could fundamentally reshape the geopolitical landscape of the entire Middle East. While U.S. involvement in the conflict could align with strategic interests, it carries significant risks that must be balanced against the potential costs to American lives, regional stability, and global security. Ultimately, as the long history of conflict in the region demonstrates, diplomacy should not be overlooked in favor of military solutions. The evolving dynamics between Israel, Iran, and the international community will require nuanced, multifaceted strategies that prioritize peace and stability above all else. In the end, avoiding war should remain the guiding principle, as the stakes are too high for all parties involved in this volatile region. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and give your valuable feedback by commenting. Thank you.